afternoon, everyone. I'm Minakshee. I'm a professor of Pragati College of Education, Dagapur, Siliguri. So, this lecture it's a continuation of my last lecture, and again today I am here with my paper 6, and the topic is gender bias. So it's a very common term, gender bias, and this biasness it's everywhere in every situation in our day-to-day life. Gender bias actually it's what? It's a behavior that shows favoritism towards one gender over another. Most often, gender bias is the act of favoring a men or the boy over women or girls. However, this is not always the case. In order to define gender bias completely, we first must make a distinction between the terms gender and the sex. So, when we use the term gender, we mean socially constructed expectations or and roles of women and men for girl and boys, especially girls and women are expected to demonstrate a feminine behavior, and boys and men are expected to act masculine. um, by sex, we mean biological differences assigned to the male and the female in order to distinguish between the two. So, the biological characteristics assigned to the male and female often consist of primary or secondary sex characteristics. So, the term gender bias is often or wrongly used interchangeably with the term sexism. So, sexism is typically defined as the subordination of one sex, usually a female, based on assumed superiority of other sex, or an ideologically that defines a female as a different from and inferior to male. So, sex is the basis for the prejudice and presumed uh, inferiority implicit in the term sexism. So, the term gender bias is more inclusive than the term sexism. As it includes both prejudice, that is attitudes, and discrimination, which is related to our day-to-day behavior in its definition. So, studies of gender bias also focus on gender rather than on sex. Further, more the term gender bias could include instances of bias against boy and men in addition to bias against girls and women. So, gender roles and expectations concentrating both girl and boy and both men and women. So it can be said that gender bias limits the overall development of contemporary societies. So gender bias is a part of almost every aspect of our day-to-day life. The most common areas of gender bias are found in the social institution of families, education, the economy, and health. at the household level, first I am going to discuss about that. At the household level, there is a documented evidence of gender bias in the allocation of resources. uh, Patriarchal households are maintained through power and control in the hands of the men, particularly father, as the head of the households. Especially gendered roles assigned as a breadwinner husband and homemaker wife lead it's lead to unequal distribution of power within the household. However, the number of dual income families and the female headed household are growing rapidly in India. Constantly, women's and men's attitude towards sharing work in the household have changed over the years. Both women and men often face conflict between work and family. The juggling of work and these power differences often confirm gender roles. With women typically desiring more change than men. So along these lines of power differentials, gender bias within families can come in forms of violence as well. So while it is certainly not the case in every family, women are significantly more likely than men to be physically abused and injured by their inmate partners. So, um, in our basically it's all about we can say that in more or less in every families there is a small kind of dominance, or we can say that patriarchal or patrimony. It's very prominent in every part of our Indian society. But we can say that a form of violence, it's intense in some areas like villages or uneducated peoples, but those who are educated and staying in urban areas, and they are aware with the these law and order, and they are under the jurisdiction of police or our judiciary. They are there is a very less dominance of patriarchy is there, but some um, label it's there. So the next is this gender bias is embedded in education from pre-kindergarten through graduate school. uh, Teachers provide important messages about gender through both the formal content of their instruction and materials utilized, as well as informal interaction with the students, which is commonly referred to as the hidden curriculum. So gender related messages from teachers, from the students, often reinforce gender roles first taught at home. So we can say that education is making a landmark in our society to overcome from this gender biasness. Researchers have constantly found that the teachers give more time, effort, and attention to boy than the girls. So, gender bias exists in textbooks, in instructional materials as well. There is also, but some kind of biasness. Women are often under represented in course materials and are presented in stereotypical roles. So, like in our history book, if we are going to take the references of our freedom fighters, so there is a, I think no one name is coming, women name is coming in this syllabus. So and there is also a kind of gender biasness, we can say that in textbook also it's there. Then again in if we are going to see our other aspects, like biography we are going to read, then hardly we are getting any biography of the women in our textbook. So a gender biasness, it's also there in our textbooks of present education system. Over time, gender bias in education undermines girls, women's self-esteem and discourages them from taking courses such as the math, science and engineering. These courses also, it's like in engineering or in MBA, most of the number prominent there is the male, not female. So these are the gender biasness. But in nursing, hardly any boy or the men are coming in this sector. So we can say that this is also a kind of gender biasness. So this biasness, of course, this is going in on our coming generation also. So we have to cope up and we have to see that, like in kindergarten teacher, we are watching that there is a dominance of female only but not men. So nurturing or caring is the one and only duty which is given to the women only. So this is also a kind of biasness. So the gender bias in economy system also, it's present. Economy system encourage women to go into a traditional women's job, and that serve employers well. Um, they are able to pay women lower salaries for traditional women's job and then for the traditional men's job. So like we have example, in any hotel there is a receptionist which is women only, and they are working like MTS, like computer, like assistance of the staff, then guidance of their customers, everything they are dealing, but they are getting wages very less. So sociologists have argued that this is not a reflection of educational differences between men and women. Rather, it is a product of gender bias in employment, promotion and payment. So it's a economic system, like if we are going to in economy, I have very good example, like women these days, they are getting their good education, they are getting their good job, but whenever we are going to talk about their immovable property, or we can say that their land, their economic strength, then they don't have these things. Even this date, even in our educated and renowned and reputed families, even we are going there, then we are watching that there is a no policies which is related to the women. They don't have actually, because women, they are thinking that they cannot support to their family, only the men they can support their family, and in the absence or after them, it's their duty that they have to pursue their family. So they are taking these policies or LIC or many things, but women they don't have, because they are only the subordinate class of the society. So above this again, we have another one thing. The Indian healthcare system has long been dominated by men, from the doctor to researcher to administrators everywhere. So while more and more women are entering medical school and medical related fields, gender bias is still embedded in the system. As discussed above, women on average make up a weaker position in the labor market than men. Thus, they are less likely to occupy positions that offer adequate health care, insurance, even when they work full time, but they are not getting pay. Female headed households are affected by this most strongly, as they are more likely to be poor than the male headed or dual headed households. In addition to the social institution reviewed here, gender bias is embedded in the media, sports, the state government or government and other social institutions. Gender is so so pervasive in contemporary society that we often do not notice gender bias in our everyday lives. However, gender itself is not a variable that stands alone. Our race, ethnicity, social class, uh, sexual orientation, and other social positions affect our everyday gender experiences. Therefore, gender bias regularly intersect with other forms of bias such as the ethnocentrism, racism, classism, and homophobia. So, while it may be appeared gender bias disadvantages girls and women the most, gender bias as well as other forms of bias shortchanges all of us. So this gender biasness, it's in our ritual, it's our in culture, it's our in day-to-day practice and everywhere, and through this awareness only we can overcome with this social weakness. Because our present population, 50% population is a women, and when we will overcome from this biasness, then ultimately we will utilize 100% of our population in our Indian economic growth. So there is a need that we have to uplift this marginalized 50% of our Indian population, that we can make this class strength and also our country. So thank you so much. Thank you everyone.